Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about a huge game out there in Dallas, SMU going up against Pitt, one that will definitely decide a lot over there in the ACC, and definitely one that you're going to want to be tuned into. A huge one, and definitely could set up one of these teams for a little bit of a CFP run. But let's get into a couple of SEC games. We have a huge game down there in Jacksonville, as well as one over there in Columbia, South Carolina, that could be just a little bit of a spoiler, but let's get into that first one over there in Jacksonville. The largest outdoor cocktail party is this upcoming weekend, a game that I've had the pleasure of going to. Incredible atmosphere. It is all over the place. There are fans really going at each other. It's so much fun to be in that atmosphere. I was at the game where Brock Bowers made just the most ridiculous tip play that I've ever seen in my life, but very fun atmosphere. Absolutely loved it, and it's one that Georgia has played really well in for the past little bit. I believe Kirby Smart is 6-2 in these games. He has definitely dominated since he has taken over. And the big question as you head into this, if you're Florida, they played really good football the last little bit. They're 3-1 in their last 4 games, the one loss being the overtime game to Tennessee. DJ Lagway has played really good football. He's been able to push the ball downfield. Could he possibly become a Gators legend this upcoming weekend, knock off Georgia in year one, and possibly just set them off on a very interesting end of their season? But on the other side, you have the Georgia team that is coming off a bye as well, coming off a game in Austin, Texas, where they looked like Georgia. They looked like the team that I think a lot of us expected going into the season, and a lot of us have seen in the last couple of seasons. So a very dominant team. I think we all understand that. If that's the defensive line you're getting coming forward, it's going to be a nightmare to deal with for just about everyone. The thing is, after this game is going to be plenty tough in and of itself, but then you got Ole Miss and Tennessee over the next 2 weeks. It's going to get tougher for Georgia, and they got a really tough run coming up. So this is a huge prerequisite where you just got to get this win, make sure that you have a little bit of wiggle room down the stretch. But at the end of the day, you obviously want to get this win. This game is always interesting. This game is always intense, and it could get interesting in a hurry. Florida is able to run the ball against pretty much any team in the country, and they can make those big plays through the air. So if UGA offensive woes kind of continue, this one could get interesting in a hurry. But a couple of players to watch. You got to talk about Trevor Etienne here. He is going back to the team that he played for last year. They do not like him very much. They have made that very clear through a couple of Instagram and Twitter posts. So it's going to be aggressive. He's going to get hit a little bit harder than just about everyone else on that field, and we'll see how he responds. It felt like he kind of found something in Austin a couple of weeks ago. Can he continue that on Saturday? And then you got the man that scares just about everyone. You have a freshman quarterback on the other side for Florida walking into an environment that he has never been in. If you put Jalen Walker on the other side, he is going to get a little scared. I'm just being totally honest. I think that's human nature when you see someone like Jalen Walker on the other side of the line of scrimmage. But at the end of the day, he is a hugely impactful player. He's someone that you're probably going to unload a lot of these very talented edge rushers on this young quarterback and then just make him respond. And this is going to be one of those guys. Him and Mykel Williams could just end this game very early if they're able to get after the young kid very early, because that could just mean he totally unravels. But on the Florida side, Jaden Ball has got to continue being huge because Montrell Johnson, I believe, is going to be back in this game. It still feels like it's a little bit up in the air, but at the end of the day, Jaden Ball is going to have to be able to carry a load in this game. He had 5 touchdowns against Kentucky, very talented player, but regardless of if Montrell Johnson is back or not, he's going to be carrying a load. A freshman in a very tough game against a very tough team. Is he up for the challenge? And he's pretty much got to be up for the challenge, frankly, if they're going to be able to win this game. And then you got Triquez Bridges, a very talented player in that Florida defense, had 11 tackles and a pick against Kentucky. He's one of those guys that really puts a lot of things together for that defense, especially on that back end. He's someone that could possibly get a couple of mistakes from Carson Beck, could possibly put them in some tough situations and give the young kid a couple of short fields, which frankly, they just outright need in this game if they're going to be able to get it done. And a couple of keys to this game. I think the run game battle is going to be fascinating to watch, whether Montrell Johnson is on the field or not. And I think he probably will be. I think this is going to be a game that's really hard to keep him off the field for. But Jaden Ball and Montrell Johnson against a top 20 run defense, going to be really fun to watch. And then Georgia, it felt like they kind of found something against Texas. It wasn't necessarily pretty. The numbers weren't great, and Texas' run defense is very good. But you found 87 yards for Trevor Etienne, I believe, on only 9 or 10 carries. You have the ability to kind of up that load just a little bit more in this game, possibly get a little bit more push with Jared Wilson being a little bit more healthy. maybe Tate Ratledge is back. I would be a little bit surprised, but he seemed like he was gearing up in that Texas game, so maybe he's back, and then you're really off running with the run game if you're Georgia. And then you got to get DJ Lagway comfortable. This is going to be different for him. He's played in a lot of really tough atmospheres. I mean, even playing in front of the Swamp is plenty intimidating in and of itself. This is going to be totally different because everything changes in a second in that building. You could have 1 second where you're getting tons of cheers from your fans and tons of boos from the other side, and then it flips in a second if you make one mistake. He has to be able to keep his head about him. He has to be able to stay within himself because he starts making a couple of mistakes. This Georgia team will take over and not look back. That's just the reality of the way they play. So DJ's got to get comfortable early, got to make a couple of passes, and if he doesn't, it could get ugly, no doubt. And then can Florida force turnovers? Because it's been a problem for Carson Beck in this year. He's had multiple 3 interception games against Alabama and Texas. Florida has the ability to get a couple of extra possessions for this young quarterback, and they're going to need to do it at some point in this game if they're going to be able to get this one done. I think that line of 17 is just a little bit too long, but not too long. Not aggressively too long. I think Georgia has the ability to win this game. I do think they're going to win it by about 2 scores. I think Florida's a good team. I also think there are still some flaws there, and I think Georgia is looking like a well-oiled machine right now. So I'm not going to pick against them right now. I think they're rolling, and I think they're going to be an absolute nightmare to deal with the rest of the way. This is just one of the stepping stones on that way. So Georgia gets a big-time win again in Gainesville and sets themselves up for a very interesting 2-week run against Ole Miss and Tennessee. And then we got to move over to this one because we're about to do upset alerts in a couple of segments here. This would be on it if I wasn't doing a full breakdown because this one is going to get interesting. And A&M just came off a remarkable game that launched them to the very top of the college football world. There's so many people talking about them. They're sitting alone at the top of the biggest conference in the country. There's so many things going right for A&M. The funny thing is, their quarterback situation is still very questionable. You have Marcel Reed. I do think he's going to be the starter in this game. I feel pretty confident that he will be the first one trotting out there. Will he be the second one? Will he trot out there on the 4th drive or the 5th drive? Because that's the big time question for me. How do they approach this going forward? Is it just Marcel Reed's team now and they go fully in that direction? Is it if Marcel Reed starts to make a couple of mistakes, they go back to Connor Wegman? Is it fully just matchup based? There's so many different ways that they can go about this, and frankly, there is a number of different ways that they can go about this and still win games up until that Texas game at the end of the year. You're going to have to figure out at some point who your quarterback is and how you want to move forward with that guy because you can't go into a game against a top 10 team like Texas and expect to win it with a weird quarterback situation. So this will go a long way to kind of figuring that out. Is it going to be Marcel Reed the whole way? Is Connor Wegman going to be right there in the wings waiting just to take that job right back? It's going to be really interesting to watch, but this is definitely a very interesting spot for them. A&M, if they were able to get this win, I think it fully sets themselves up for a showdown against Texas in College Station at the end of the year, being a 10-2 team. So a lot of things could go right in this game for A&M. Obviously, a lot of things could go wrong. Williams-Brice is a very special atmosphere. The defense for South Carolina can really get after you, and they're coming off a bye last week. This one could get really interesting and bring all of this hype train for A&M to a screeching halt, which obviously the Aggies don't want. It'll be very interesting to watch this one, but Cyrus Allen is a guy that I want you guys to keep your eyes on because he's not necessarily the most prolific receiver for this A&M room. Noah Thomas is going to be a problem. Jade Walker is a very good player. I think you're going to need speed in this game. I think there's so many different things that A&M can do offensively, and they can hurt you in so many different ways. If you're going to find a pass game, especially with Marcel Reed at quarterback, it has to, I don't want to say it has to be spoon-fed. He can make those big plays over the down the field, but he does need to have a couple of plays where it's just get the ball out on the perimeter, let that guy make a play. I think he's more than capable of doing that, but you're going to have a couple of guys to do that. I think Cyrus Allen is one that you get the ball in his hands 5 yards or closer to the line of scrimmage, he can turn it into 25 yards, 30 yards downfield. So not necessarily a player that's gotten too much involved early on, but I do think he's going to be very important down the stretch. And I also think Jabri Barber is another guy to watch in that position. Very much need that speed on the outside. And then another guy to watch, Torian York is huge in this game. He is the leader of this defense. He is the green dot guy. He is the guy that gets everyone in line. And you're playing a quarterback in Lenore Sellers that can make you can make pretty much any defense in the country confused because he is so good at running that mesh concept. He's so good at getting out on the edge once they've had it. And frankly, he's very physical. He can really hurt a guy if he's out in space and just one-on-one with the DB. That DB is probably not having a really great time on that day. So Torian York's going to have to make some big-time plays in this game. And if he can't, then South Carolina very well could get this offense going pretty well. On the other side, I think Josh Simon is huge in this game. This A&M defensive line is going to get after you. There is no two ways about that. There's going to be so many things that they're going to have to deal with on the front as an offensive line. Best way to deal with that is get a tight end, an extra blocker possibly, or he chips and then goes out for a route. You hit him and then he makes plays. This is a uber athletic guy. This is one of the more athletic tight ends in the entire country. He is someone that can make them hurt after the catch, and they're going to have to get the ball to him pretty quickly because this A&M defensive line is no joke. And then we got to talk about Kyle Kennard. If you're talking about a South Carolina game, you got to talk about this guy. And frankly, I think even more so. When you have Marcel Reed as a real option in this game, Kyle Kennard getting upfield and not necessarily overcommitting to the pass game or overcommitting to the pass rush, making sure that he stays at least in phase with the offensive lineman, make sure that he doesn't give up any type of contain for this quarterback. And then when they run that mesh concept, when they run those read options and all of those different things, he's got to be very disciplined. He's going to be the guy that's going to have to make a lot of these tackles where Marcel Reed has a chance to get out on the edge, and then it's Kyle Kennard taking him down. But if it's not, then it might be Marcel Reed going 80 yards for a touchdown. So a hugely important player, not only in the pass rush game, but in the run defense, going to be massive, along with Dylan Stewart on the other side. And then keys to this game, we talked about it a second ago, the pass rush is going to be huge. Both these defensive lines are some of the best in the entire country. They have, A&M has 19 sacks on the year, South Carolina 28. They can get after the quarterback. Now the thing about it is, you have two quarterbacks that are very mobile, and if they get out of the pocket, they're going to be problems for you. So can you get them on the ground? It's not only about causing pressure, that obviously does help with two quarterbacks that aren't necessarily elite throwers of the football, that obviously is going to help, but you got to get these guys on the ground. If you can't do that, then it's going to be a very long day for your defense. And then A&M's quarterback situation. How does this work? Is it Marcel Reed and Marcel Reed until you die? Is it Marcel Reed until he has a little bit of a mistake and then it's Connor Wegman? Is it Connor Wegman? Do they just go right back to the other guy as the starter in this game? I do think it'll be Marcel Reed starting. I don't think the leash is going to be super long. So it's going to be really interesting to watch that. If they're able to get after him a couple of times, that run game doesn't get going the way that you thought, and you think maybe we need a little bit more downfield passing game. Maybe they go right back to Connor Wegman. It's going to be fascinating to watch and could very well be the difference in this game. And then it's William Bryce at night. We have to talk about it. They've only had one true night game this entire year. It was against Akron. I promise you, this fan base is itching to get in that building on Saturday. They are waiting for this moment, and they can absolutely step up to the plate. This is such a special atmosphere. There are so many different fans that are incredibly passionate about this team, and I think they can get this one done. They have been talking plenty of trash on Twitter, and I think they're a team that absolutely has the ability to do it, and I think they're going to do it. I'm going to take the trap. I know there's a lot of people out there picking South Carolina. I know that that's being a popular pick around the college football world. I will fall into that trap. I will be the guy that comes on here on Monday and says, I probably should have picked A&M. But at the end of the day, I do think South Carolina gets this done. I think the pass rush is just too much. I think Marcel Reed, while a very good player, got the benefit of the doubt with the LSU defense not being nearly as prepared as they needed to be. I think this South Carolina game is an absolute nightmare for A&M, and I think they move forward in their season with quite a few questions about where they're going, especially in the CFP and particularly in the SEC going forward. It'll be really interesting to watch that one unfold, and really both those are a little bit of an upset alert. But let's take our second break here, and when we come back, we got to get into the playoff. We got to talk about where everyone sits. We'll break them down into 4 different tiers. One tier just has one team in it, and I'll break that down right after this, so stick with us.